So somebody's asked me what's the actual legislation governing prisons in the United Kingdom, and there are 11 pieces of legislation that are relevant. Let's go through them, and I'll add uh, subtitles with details of the date, so it's as clear as possible. The first thing is the Jails Act in 1823, which is the Robert Peel thing, which aimed to standardise and improve conditions in prisons. And it mandated regular inspections, but this didn't necessarily happen. It also tried to separate prisoners by gender, providing education and religious instruction. It marked a beginning of systematic prison reform and was spurred on by people like Elizabeth
It's
Fry.
me, Elizabeth Fry. The lady with a passion for reform and on the banknotes.
But its implementation was inconsistent. The Prison Act in 1865 is the second big change. It's the thing which is about hard labour, hard fare, hard board, and it imposed uniformity of prison discipline across the system, and advocating austerity for all prisoners. The Act reinforced the punitive nature of prisons.
Mary MacDonald, hard labour, convicted of theft in 1873.
Reducing variation in prison conditions. However, it was criticised for being excessively harsh, reflecting the Victorian emphasis on punishment over rehabilitation. The Prison Act of 1898 aimed to reduce the severity of prison conditions and introduce more reforms like the abolition of the treadmills and the separation of juvenile offenders from adults. But of course, during this period, there were different forms of prison and incarceration. The Criminal Justice Act in 1948, so a long time between those two reforms, this abolished penal servitude, hard labour and flogging, and introduced a range of alternatives to imprisonment such as probation and parole for the first time. The Act was a significant step towards modernising the criminal justice system, emphasising rehabilitation over punishment, although prisons still struggled with overcrowding and outdated practices. The 1964 Prison Rules Act provided a legal framework for the management of prisons, emphasising the importance of rehabilitation, education, the well-being of prisoners, and the rules set the tone for a more humane and rehabilitative approach to imprisonment, but challenges in implementation and resource allocation limited the impact. The Criminal Justice Act of 1991 aimed to introduce a more structured sentencing framework, emphasising proportionality and the need to protect the public. It also tried to expand community sentences and reduce reliance on imprisonment. While the Act provided a more rational basis for sentencing, its effectiveness was undermined by political pressure and the public demand for tougher sentences, leading to continued high incarceration. The 1997 Crime Sentences Act introduced a mandatory minimum sentence for repeat offenders, particularly for serious crimes such as to get tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. So the Act led to an increase in the prison population, was criticised for limiting judicial discretion and contributing to the overcrowding of prisons. That, I think, has not really changed. The Human Rights Act in 1998, though not specifically a prison act, incorporated the European Convention on Human Rights into UK law, impacting prison conditions and the treatment of offenders. And the Act has been used to challenge inhumane prison conditions, ensuring that the rights of prisoners are protected, though it has sparked debates about the balance between prisoners' rights and public safety. The Criminal Justice Act in 2003 introduced a range of measures, including indeterminate sentences for public protection, the IPPs, extending the use of community sentences, and again it's led to a significant increase in prison population and has been widely criticised for creating a backlog of prisoners with no clear release date. The Act has also faced criticism for its complexity and its inconsistent application. The Offender Rehabilitation Act of 2014, this is probably one of the most important issues today. It aimed to reduce reoffending by extending probation services to prisoners serving short sentences and introducing new rehabilitation programs. But the problem is that both the sentence and the probation can effectively be imposed by judges, and it's also effectively compromised by the privatization of the probation service, leading to mixed results in reducing reoffending rates. So if the aim of the Offender Rehabilitation Act in 2014 was to reduce reoffending, it has failed. There's a Prisons and Courts Bill in 2017 which didn't happen, and the bill aimed to overhaul the prison system, focusing on improved safety, security, the rehabilitation of prisons. Rory Stewart was urging for a training centre for prison officers, an emphasis on governor autonomy. Although the bill wasn't enacted due to the 2017 general election, its introduction highlighted ongoing concerns about prison reform and the need for significant changes in prison management. The Sentencing Act of 2020 consolidated existing sentencing laws, simplified procedures, introduced new provisions to ensure that serious offenders serve longer in prison, and the Act again has been criticised for contributing to prison overcrowding and for not doing enough to address the underlying causes of crime or to promote rehabilitation. British prison reform is characterised by a gradual shift from punitive measures to more rehabilitative approaches, although the balance between punishment and rehabilitation has fluctuated, and generally when looking to see which way the wind is blowing, the government of the day has opted for punishment and incarceration. While many laws have contributed to improving prison conditions and focusing on rehabilitation, the challenges such as overcrowding, resource allocation, staffing, and political pressures continue to impact on the effectiveness of any form of reform.